Welcome to week 2, breaking the story. We're going to go from logline and try to move towards that story beats outline phase of the pre-writing process. Here's the new bootcamp dates. We have new feature bootcamp starting April 30th. That's going to be Sundays 11 to 1 in this current slot. So once the slots are finished, the Friday 6 to 8 and Sunday 11 to 1, they both swap places with each other. We have novel bootcamp that's going on in WordCamp, Saturdays from 12 to 2. That started March 4th. You can still definitely come by and listen into these if you want. It's probably too late if you wanted to catch up and write a book with the program at this point, 4 weeks in, but you can still, for sure, come to these classes if you'd like. We have new session of Pilot Bootcamp starting April 21st. That will switch to Fridays at 6 for 6 weeks. We also have script consultations, development sessions, first chapter reading, first page, query letter, proofreading, editing in the manuscript level or developmental level. So plenty of things to choose from if you want to just get more extensive feedback and consultation work. You can find this all scriptcamp.net/coverage. If anyone has not yet enrolled, you can do so by going to scriptcamp.net/classes to get the class on its own. Or if you become a supporting member, you will get unlimited access to all of our different classes. You can find that at scriptcamp.net/membership. About 100 hours of live classes, events, workshops every single month you will be able to find on our Discord server. And our other Discord servers too, which include everything from novel writing in WordCamp to animation in ToonCamp, filmmaking in FilmCamp, Design Camp for graphic design, and plenty more coming. Oh, CodeCamp is our other one that we've had lots of great classes on so far, with plenty more coming soon, even on our smaller servers that we have not yet hosted classes yet. Like Lingo Camp, we have not yet had any classes on, but would love to start this year. All right, so week 2, we're going to be looking at story beats today and TV structure with the intention of finishing these story beats by April 2nd. Next week, we're doing scene cards, so we're expanding the story beats outline into a full paragraph for every single scene in the entire show, along with page estimates of how exactly long how each scene is going to be. We'll then work on writing the actual script. We say we go to pages. Go to pages being a term that refers to when we go from pre-writing and outlining to the actual script. So you're going to have to download some kind of screenwriting software before next week. I would recommend Arc Studio Pro, which is a really nice one that we've had we had a lot of success with in the past, and it has some cool outlining tools. You can also check out things like Writer Duet, which has a nice free version up to 3 different scripts. So check those out and try to find one that works for you by next week if you've not yet done so. But up until then, you don't need to download anything yet. We're all still mostly just working in blank Google documents. So week 4 is first act, week 5 is second act, week 6 is third act, with that first draft done by April 30th. All right, pilot finished in 6 weeks. Will this be good? Will the draft be good? No, it's a first draft, and beyond that, even after you do 5 drafts of it, will it be good? Chances are probably not. It takes a lot of scripts in order to get to the ones where you will actually be executing them on a very high level, so you should not hold yourself to too high a standard or have too high expectations for yourself just until you have done this a lot. So try not to get your hopes up too high. We're not going to get this show made or produced. You know, a TV script is a proposition to create a several, $million business that will last for years and employ hundreds of people. And most of us, our very first attempt at doing that will not be able to create a multi-million-dollar company. So don't bother trying to, don't worry yourself too much about this. Is my show going to get made? What's going to happen in season 2 or season 3? All these questions are kind of less relevant than, can I just finish this draft? Can I make it as good as it can possibly be? You are not going to probably end up with a masterpiece on your first couple tries, or even something that's particularly entertaining at all. Screenwriting is tricky. It's like playing the violin in a way, whereas something like playwriting is a little more like playing the piano. Like, you can come up and you can start pressing keys, and it will sound like music on the piano pretty early on. That's kind of like playwriting. You can write lines for actors, get them up on a stage, and it will feel like a play, basically. It may not be amazing, but it will definitely feel like a play. As opposed to screenwriting, where it's like learning the violin. It's hard to even make it emit a clear, consistent sound in the first place, because you have to learn to hold the bow right, and you have to learn to position your chin just right. You have to learn to do a lot of things right just to make it something that somebody will be able to read all the way through and not be bored or thrown off by something and just stop reading the script. That in and of itself is an accomplishment. If you're writing scripts that somebody will read all the way through, that is a good sign, and it's not the easiest thing. So don't expect to be coming out with great scripts or even good scripts or even kind of okay scripts right away. Try to just release those expectations and understand this is like, playing the violin takes many years before you will create a clear, consistent, beautiful sound, let alone beautiful songs. So, week 2 overview, we'll start with check-in, and we'll ask, what have you worked on lately? Have you finished your logline if you started one last week? We can look at and give feedback on those revised loglines for today. And you'll also be able to tell us about those great TV scripts that you've been reading lately, because every single week we're going to ask, what pilots have you read this week? And you can tell us all about them. It's not a quiz, just the basics of what did you read? What did you like, notice, or learn? This is an absolutely essential step that there is no navigating around. I will ask every single week, and you absolutely have to be reading to know what to do. We'll go over just a quick overview of the process. I think we've done this last week and the week before, but we will just quickly check over and make sure we understand all the steps. Then we will move right into structure, and there's plenty of that to talk about because we have our 2 sort of major formats being half an hour and 1 full hour. If we have half as much time and you have half as much space to pull things off into, you have to condense and truncate and abbreviate and combine moments, and you just have to be very clever about how you use the pages that you have access to in TV, because page real estate is a very sort of precious resource that you have to conserve and be really careful with and make cuts where you can so that you are making most efficient use of your pages. So structure, breaking story today we'll talk about, and then we can look at some story beats. And I will make sure to just get anyone on track who feels like they need help or need a hand getting to the next stage. So about halfway through the class, I'll just ask who needs help, who needs review of some kind. And if you're having problems or you're way off course for some reason, then I will try my best to get you back on. And then I suppose we may have time for exercises today, but usually I don't have too much time for these. All right, so that's going to move us from overview into check-ins from last time. So you can post your logline, series logline, and pilot logline in the assignments channel if you want to get feedback on that. Hopefully you got some early feedback on that and are in the stage of revising and you're almost finished with that by now. We should kind of have this down by the end of class today if you can. If you haven't done that already, then today is this class is the time to do that. You're going to use that to help guide your storytelling from here on out and guide the construction of the rest of the script, so it's super important to get this down. And then we'll, of course, ask about those recent pilot scripts you've been reading. All right, let's just go down the list. We'll start with Judea.
Hello.
Hi, want to give us an update?
I do have a log line.
Great.
That's what I'm supposed to send, right?
Yeah.
Okay. This is, I know you've reviewed one of my log lines before, but this isn't that one. This is a new one, but I have gotten a lot of feedback on it. So
Okay.
I hope that it's near finished. Here you
Okay,
go.
sure. Yeah, you can share that in the chat if you want. Thank you. Soulbound.
Yeah.
All right. So I'll just take a look at this now, if that's fine with you. It is? Okay. When the gods neglect a magical plague. When the gods neglect a magical plague. What am I missing here? Threatening. This first sentence, I'm missing something. Is there a word that was left out of this? Hang on. Can you read it out?
When the gods neglect a magical plague threatening the lives of mortal civilization. Was there something missing?
I thought I missed a word. Oh, you're saying... So, when you say they neglect the plague, you're saying they sort of neglect to help the people? They choose not to help the people? Okay, I think I was just not understanding the exact phrasing there. Okay, so when the gods neglect a magical plague threatening the lives of mortal civilization. So they neglect the civilization, it sounds like. A jaded hermit must traverse the globe with a sheltered mermaid in order to find the cure defended by the gods. Okay, by the same gods?
Yeah.
Okay. I think I get the essentials. The first sentence, I think, were just what was throwing me off is just the use of the word neglect here. But I think you're saying the inciting incident is a plague happens, right? So maybe that's how you should start this off. When a plague devastates the mortal civilization, right? Because I think you sort of put the cart a little bit before the horse, with starting with the god's reaction to the plague before telling us that the plague happened. So I think the inciting incident is something like when a plague threatens all of civilization, a jaded hermit must traverse the globe with a sheltered mermaid to... Are you saying they have to steal it from the gods?
Yeah,
Okay.
essentially.
Then, in order to steal a cure defended by the gods, that would make perfect sense to me.
Okay.
Cool. So I think I understand the basics, and I mean, saving the world sort of thing, we don't need a super strong sense of motivation, but I'm a little curious as to why a jaded hermit has to be the one to do this. Is there just like, in a couple words, can you explain perhaps why he's the one that needs to, or he's the one that is the only one that can help, or why is he the one that we're following?
It was sort of like a destiny sort of thing I was planning to do. So I guess I should say destined or something is destined to instead of must.
But what you mean is that like he's informed by like a prophecy or something like that?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, but anyone wants to save everybody, I assume, wants to save the world, right? So
yeah.
there's
That's
nobody
what I think too.
right. But then the question is just why this guy. So maybe you can include that he's some kind of prophesized hero in the logline if that is in fact why particularly this guy is the one getting involved. Or you can just kind of highlight what his connection to what's going on is. Like, did he used to be, I don't know, the janitor of the gods or something like that? So just if you can give us just a tiny bit more about the main character and why they're getting involved, I think that will be helpful to sell the idea. But besides that, I think I do understand the basics. This is going to be like a sort of traveling from place to place to find the clues, or maybe gather some kind of team that we need to do kind of a heist on the gods.
It's like traveling place to place, kind of thing. Them just gathering clues and try and like fighting or getting over whatever the gods throw at them along their journey.
Okay, I see. Cool. It's a little like an Odyssey type story then in that case.
Yeah, that's what I noticed after I wrote it, and I was like, "Isn't this the Odyssey?"
Not quite, but because
Not
the Odyssey is
quite, but
not about saving the world, right? The Odyssey is just about
yeah,
trying to get back home. Uh,
yeah,
in
but
any case,
it,
I think I do understand, just based on the series
okay,
logline.
that's good.
And then maybe the pilot logline can clarify a little bit more why the main character is the one that... How does he get involved exactly? That's what the pilot logline will tell us.
Mhm.
Cool. Nice work with this.
Okay.
Let's check in... Oh, and any scripts that you've read lately, Jadea, that you want to tell us about?
I feel like there should be one, but I kind of can't remember right now.
Okay. Well, for next time, let us know if you remember or if you can find it, and try to read at least one script every week to tell us about in the check-in.
Gotcha.
Thanks, Jadea. Let's check with Amanda.
Nope.
Hey there. I forgot about I'm still reading novels. I watched the Community pilot, but I need to read it now. So that's going to be my homework right after this. So, and I watched Community because of just for the kind of the structure of a pilot that kicks off with the forming of a club, which happens in mine. So, I worked on the outline a bit today for the for Act 1, and yeah, I made some progress. Nothing is really like, I think of it as like, the tent stakes fell into place with the novel structure. Like it was like all the beats just sort of fell down into place, like I saw it, and then it was a matter of sort of tweaking it, but that's the only time that's ever really happened so far. So I'm still kind of spinning my wheels a bit and trying to figure out how how the first episode is going to be. Are they going to form the club by the end of the episode? Are they going to form it in the break to 2? Kind of, still playing around with that. So that's about it for me right now.
All right, cool. Seems like, yeah, you've got a lot of groundwork done for this one, so just trying to get more concrete and specific. Very important. Thank you for the updates. Let's check with Dan.
Hello. Hi. I'm going to admit, I have been a little bit busy. So I have been writing, but mostly I've been busy these past few weeks scrambling around, dealing with the purchasing of a house.
Wow, okay.
A bigger issue, so I haven't really done much in the way of reading. It's kind of just distracting me from everything, so I might just be listening in this go around.
Okay. Did you have a pilot that you were working on, or were you mostly working on the possession feature?
You're kind of working on a pilot.
Doing the pilot as well. Okay, so you're trying to pull off both. That's okay. We have seen folks struggle to do more than one boot camp at a time. It might be necessary to just put one on hold for a little while. But yeah, you're still welcome to listen in if that's the case, even if you feel like you can't complete 2 boot camps simultaneously.
Yeah, all right. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Let's check with Jaime.
All right, so I think I missed last week's. I don't remember. Or I did show up. I don't remember. But anyways, I don't think I've had my series logline or pilot logline reviewed yet. So I put the sketchbook and loglines. They're there in the chat. As for the TV pilot script, not going to happen until I start reading feature scripts. So and so I got the novel reading down. I just start reading feature scripts, but I'll try to squeeze in a TV pilot script at least once a week. But yeah.
All right. Thanks for that. Shall we take a look at your logline now?
Yes.
All right. Let's do that. Lupe and Betty. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Can you read this for us?
Okay. Genre action drama, format time slot 60-minute, premise limited series. Tom, Thelma and Louise meets the Punisher. Series logline: after the brutal deaths of their loved ones, a female Sicario and an Apache woman must team up to take down the criminals responsible. Pilot logline: when a crime family kills witnesses to a human trafficking ring, a female hitman and an Apache woman trained in Native American warfare agree to work together to hunt down and wipe out the traffickers.
All right, thanks for that. So, nice work with this. I get the basics. I mean, this is sort of revenge action thriller kind of storyline, which is familiar territory, but was, always sort of works. We get the idea that somebody murders your family, you go and murder them. I totally understand. After the brutal deaths of their loved ones, a female Sicario and an Apache woman must team up and take down the criminals responsible. So just something like an Apache woman? Like, if you've given us one character's kind of job, if you can maybe tell us what the Apache woman's role is as well, then that might just be a better word to choose or to include in the series logline. Is she, a doctor? Is she, think of who is she in her previous life before she goes on this revenge mission. When a crime family kills witnesses to a human trafficking ring. So the pilot logline, it's just pretty much the series logline rephrased. So I think what you'll need for the pilot logline is help us understand what is the first sort of step in this revenge quest. So once they team up, now first they have to take out this one bad guy. Or first they need to find out who is responsible, and they need to raid this facility in order to find out. So give us a bit more of a concrete and tangible objective in the pilot logline that will help us understand this is the first step of many steps to defeating this larger organization.
Was that a question?
No, that's just me saying you should try to find a more concrete and tangible and specific goal for the pilot logline.
Okay. All right.
Cool. Make sense?
Yes, it does.
Great. Thank you for sharing. Everything else is looking good, and I think I can totally see the show.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Jaime. Who else? Joel. Oh, wait, maybe Joel said not to check in with him. He said, I can't take part in this class this week, but will ask for help later. Okay, that's fine. Thanks, Joel. Nacho is working on a feature and his book. He gave us an update yesterday. Let's check with Roger.
Hi, Connor. I'm sorry to be the guy with excuses today. This was a week of me, my family being sick, but I want to dial back in. But I do have a couple questions for my robot pilot today that I think you could be helpful with. So as far as the plot and a logline thing. So whenever you're ready, I do have a question.
Sure, I could take, if it's just one question, I could take it right now, or if you need more time to, formulate it, then we could wait until class gets going.
Okay, I will wait till class gets going. Thank you.
Okay, sounds good. Let me know. Thanks, Roger. And, anything you've read this week?
I didn't read this week. I did watch the pilot of Poker Face, so I owe a couple pilot reads this week.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Roger. Let's check with Willow. Are you here, Willow?
I'm here.
Hey, okay, we can hear you. Can you give us an update?
I've been working on my pilot. I've got about 12 pages written. Going pretty well. I'll admit I haven't done any of the reading. I haven't even watched any TV. I'm trying to move out of my house at the moment. Yeah, I've been doing some writing every day.
Great. Okay. Well, that's important. Get some done every day. If you're already 12 pages in, then you are a little bit ahead of the rest of the class. But that's totally fine. Glad you're getting some progress done. Thank you for the updates. I think we have one more check-in to do. Zach. Zach is eating. Okay. Feel free to type your check-in with us, Zach. Tell us your progress and what you read this week. And if not, then you can unmute and I can call on you soon.
Just going to mention to everyone, Zach used script coins to get a table read of his pilot. This is a different pilot, I assume not the one he's working on. But that's going to be a little bit later today at 2 p.m. Pacific.
Awesome. Wow, what a great idea, using your script coins to get a table read. So that means, every unlimited member gets, is it 100 coins a month, Nacho?
100 coins to start, and then 50 coins per month.
Okay, 100 coins to start and 50 coins per month. It takes 100 coins to get a full table read with people reading every roll and giving you feedback in our public channels. So you should use your coins for that. If you haven't spent them yet, you have them and they are unspent. Okay, so I just if no other reason, I am here to be the stern, finger-wagging, mean principal man and say, it seems like nobody read a single script in preparation for this class this week, despite the fact that I keep saying how important it is, and not one script has been read. It's so sad.
I read a third of the community pilot.
Okay,
I just
great.
realized before I watched it. I just remembered that. So.
Okay, well, that's a start. It's better than nothing for sure. I just mean to say, it's very important that we be reading scripts. You will not be a TV writer unless you are reading scripts. This is just I know you all are aware of this already. Everybody hates to hear the teachers say do your homework, but seriously, got to do the homework. There's so many questions that will be answered by this, and so many techniques that you will see. It's just an absolutely unskippable and vital step. There's no way you're gonna get around it. And every week I'm gonna ask again. So just it's fun. It's nice. Find scripts to read. There's a bunch of links there, a bunch of PDFs. Nacho just linked a Google group. Go ahead.
Hello. I remembered.
Remember what?
I read
Sorry,
Solar. I read the script Solar Opposite, which has
awesome.
a show, I'm pretty sure, which
Yeah.
I've never seen, but I read the pilot script.
I read that one too, and the show's kind of funny.
It's on
At
Hulu.
first, it's on Hulu. I've never seen it though. I just read the script this week. It was pretty good, honestly. I wasn't into it at first, and then suddenly I was just like, you know what? It's kind of funny.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So I read that, and it was pretty good. I guess I did kind of pay attention to the techniques, like the way they did montages and whatnot. But honestly, I'm so bad at retaining things, which is why I forgot it in the first place.
That's okay. I mean, at least you read it, and that's the important thing. Anything else you noticed or liked or learned in there?
The way they structure their plots reminded me of a lot of cartoons, which makes sense because it is a cartoon, and I realized they have their own way of like sort of doing things when you're episodic, I suppose.
Right.
Which
Like,
episodic isn't my goal, but it was interesting to like see all the similarities between it and like other episodic shows.
great. Okay, well, thank you so much for having read a script and talking about it. That's really all this is. There's no quiz or anything. Just what did you notice? What did you read, and what did you think is all that we're asking. Thanks, Jadea.
Okay. You're welcome.
All right, so let's finalize series and pilot loglines. If anyone has not yet had that reviewed or has questions about theirs, now is the time. Any volunteers for logline? Final call on loglines?
I have a question.
Yes.
My question is just this, Connor. In my robot employees with robots joining them as coworkers pilot, I had a thought about flipping my protagonists to the robots and making the humans the bad guys. I just wanted to know if that's off, if that gets away from the fun of, the real world thing of AI coming to take all our jobs. On the other hand, it kind of made it fun to make the humans kind of the power bully position and the robots the ones having to prove themselves, as kind of an analogy for race or something like that.
It's an interesting proposition. I never would have considered it, but now that you bring it up, I mean, I think I can see a way that it might be able to work. It does sort of, I mean, I guess it just kind of depends how are you depicting the robots. If you're thinking of them as, are they just like people? Like, do they work the exact same way people do? Are they totally sentient and sapient and self-aware?
Yes.
They are. Okay, so we're at this full singularity. There's like complete artificial intelligence.
Yes, I think they should be fun and robotic in certain ways, or not obviously have their own quirks that are that only a robot could have. Lingering, machine-like attributes. But yeah, fully people-like. Bender on Futurama. Let's say.
So let me ask, I guess this: do they have emotions?
Yes.
They do. So that's an unusual choice for factory-working robots, right?
Okay, that is. You're right.
So which is not to say that it wouldn't work, but that is to say that you should probably lean into that and make that a major plot point, or use that in your plot in some kind of substantial way. Because I can't think of a reason why you would give emotions to factory, like drone-style robots. But maybe you could play it like this AI is so advanced they use a kind of gel-based reactive brain or something like that, like in Ex Machina, where they have to develop emotions or else the machinery just won't work, or something like that. Or maybe it could be like they're developing emotions outside of our control, like they're not supposed to be, but they are. And they're developing in such a way that they're becoming sort of more humanized over time. Or maybe it could be that the emotions are planted there to make the humans more accepting of them, at which point they're almost like infiltrators who are slowly taking the people's jobs away, right? So there's lots of ways you could take it, but I guess that's the central question is, if we have robots as your main characters that are performing menial jobs that are not even really meant to interface with other people, then why would they have the emotional range to support being the protagonist of a multi-season show? So that's a question that leaps out to me, and it's sort of an invitation and a challenge for you to figure out those answers, and it just makes you approach the show in a pretty different way, from a pretty different point of view. It also might sort of come across like you are, I mean, depending on exactly how you play it, and you could play this many different ways. It might come across, if you play it wrong, I guess, like you are sort of supporting androids, whatever, robots taking over the manufacturing sectors or whatever sector I think this is manufacturing you mentioned, right?
Yeah.
So if we there's no way to tell a story about somebody from their point of view and not engender some sort of sympathy for them. And especially if your main character is going to be funny and flawed in all the ways that a comedy protagonist is. And it might sort of seem like ultimately you're saying it's good that our robots are taking over all these sectors and moving people out of them. And maybe you do feel that way. Or maybe there are some reasons why that is a good thing. I mean, I'm sure there are. And so if the show it does make the show more complicated. It makes the morality and the ethics of what's going on here potentially more, interesting fodder for sci-fi. If you sort of raise this question, well, maybe it is better. Maybe people won't get hurt on the assembly line anymore. Maybe you're going to have opportunities to move into other sectors, and that's what you should do instead. It just kind of putting the robots at the forefront makes it inherently a little bit more challenging of a concept.
Oh, okay. That's a fair point.
But I don't think it's a bad thing. If you want to do that, then you totally can. But if you want the premise to sort of fade into the background a little bit, I'm not sure if that makes sense. How does the premise fade into the background? The premise is everything we're doing. But if you want it to be a little more seamlessly accessible, I guess I would say, then the humans are the good guys, the robots are taking our jobs as the bad guys is kind of just the most people's assumption of how it would go, right? So I guess if you're framing it but from the opposite lens, then you're sort of saying I'm deliberately subverting the way that people think it will go.
Got it. Okay. Am I should stick to what I have.
It's up to you. I think both are interesting, but you'll just have to decide what do I have to say with this, and am I picking a main character that is able to interface with the world in the most interesting way that's going to create the most laughs week after week. A robot character can be very funny. I think you mentioned Bender is hilarious. You can do hilarious robot characters, and there's all kinds of stuff that will work. Really interesting ways to interact with those characters and ways they can interact with each other, but just on its face, it does make us kind of go, I wonder how we could root for that, which may or may not be what you want.
Yeah, I see your point.
So it's a nuanced answer, I guess, but it's a kind of a nuanced topic.
You're right. No, it's a great answer. Okay, let me think on it. I appreciate
Sure.
that.
Thanks for the question, Roger. Zach is back and has a question based on the Sons of Anarchy pilot. Hi, Zach. I can just read this out if you want. Before we get to the pilot itself, the writer has a brief summary of the club, the location, and the characters before we get into Fade In. I've never seen it anywhere, and Sons of Anarchy is very much an ensemble. How would this look on a spec script? Wait, sorry, they're saying that was in the script, or that was just on TV? That on the show, the cold open is basically like a montage summary of the club?
No,
Go ahead.
in the pilot script itself, the actual screenplay.
Oh, in the script, in the teleplay?
Yeah, summary, yeah.
It's like a preface page that has a full paragraph on this.
More than it's probably about the first 4 pages. The pilot doesn't actually start till page 5.
Oh, okay. So it's just like a prologue almost that explains some of the essentials of the world that we're going into. How would this look on a spec script? You wouldn't include this in a spec script. What is it? Sons of Anarchy was created by a very experienced showrunner who worked on things like, The Shield, Hap and Leonard. So he has sold multiple shows up until this point. And if you sell the show, you can include whatever you want. You can include pictures in the script. You can include links in the script. You can kind of do any crazy thing you want. Most spec pilots going out would not include a multi-page long preface to the world of the show before the pilot begins. But if they did, it would probably just look exactly like you saw it there in that script. Just straight courier text, I think, is all it would look like. Hope that helps. Thanks for the question, Zach. Any other questions on loglines, series, and pilot? Everybody fully all set on their loglines moving forward? Do you have a question, Amanda, or is your mic just unmuted by accident? I see it lighting up. Oh, I think my headphones died. 1 second, sorry. That's the problem. She was probably talking just fine. Let me... Do I even have a headphone slot on this computer? I think I don't. Let me plug these in. I'll just try the speakers for a second. Okay, try now, Amanda. Nope, still can't hear. 1 second. Output speakers. Try now.
Can you hear me now?
Now I hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, cool. I was just saying that I'm still working on my pilot log line, but until I figure out where I come in in Act 1, I can't finish the log line. So I have the general idea, but whether she forms the club at the break to 2 or whether she forms the club by the end of the episode, I know those are huge differences, but I have to play around with Act 1 to figure that out. So, yeah, I'm just going to have to leave it a little vague right now, but
if we can, it would be a huge step forward if by the end of class today we could try to nail it down. So if we can ask questions, or if there's work you can do by the end of class to try to get it finished, I'd like to try to move there. If you can't, then don't worry. I mean, it's not like a huge deal, but if we can today, let's try to.
I'm leaning towards keeping it the way I have it, and that she forms the club by the end of the pilot, and that it's going to be more serialized than episodic. Okay. And I did create, like, someone mentioned yesterday that in just like maybe she has to stay clean for a year, and so that's what this first year, and so it'll just be a serialized staying off social media for a year is her initial goal. Okay. And then so that's where I'm at right now.
Okay, sure. So, yeah, there's not a lot of shows like this that are serialized, or that are premise-based pilots. I would
BoJack Horseman.
You're right, that's true. There are a couple. And I would maybe look at a show like, have you watched Freaks and Geeks?
I don't think so. I'm not sure. I think you've mentioned it to me before, but Freaks and Geeks. Okay.
That's a sort of premise pilot high school show that, has... I'm not really sure if it has a super clear high concept hook as much as yours does, but it definitely has a plot progression which this might just come to resemble a little bit more if it were serialized, or if it were premise based rather than thing of the week. In any case, I would just check it out if I were you, just because it's a great show, and it might be helpful structure wise.
Okay, and there's a pilot available for it. Meaning the script. The script is.
Probably. It's got to be. It's a very popular show.
I'll check it out.
It's from the mid to late 90s, but it's got to be out there. I'm sure you can find it.
Okay.
Thanks, Amanda. All right. So let's... assuming everyone else is good on log lines, and Amanda, feel free to check back in at some point later in class if you'd like to work more on yours. Let's try to move ahead and we'll look at this overview of everything that we have done so far. So we have logline, sketchbook, story beats, scene cards, go to pages. This is the progression we always use, no matter what it is you're working on, whether it's a pilot, movie, book, play, anything at all. So we have gone from logline, and we've just finalized those loglines, I would hope, by the end of class today. Sketchbook is going to be the unsorted list of all your influences, inspirations, research materials, and ideas that pertain to your project, and you should be filling that out constantly. And you should have this open during class to be filling out even more, and also writing down questions that you have and ideas that you have, anything that you think will be relevant for later, and just continuing to answer the questions that you haven't answered and fill in the gaps that you haven't filled while we're in class. So definitely have this open and be working during class. 4 is scene cards, so we'll move from story beats to scene cards next week, so we'll expand that list of story events into a very concrete and clear card for each scene. One full paragraph for each scene that's going to express who is this about, what are they trying to do, what is standing in the way, what tactics do they attempt to overcome it, what is the result, and how do we transition to the next moment. Those are the kind of key essential things we need to establish in those scene cards. So, structure. Let's get into structure. Did I just do this class yesterday? Oh, I think I did this yesterday on books, not on TV shows. So the major differences between writing a pilot and any other kind of work of fiction is that a pilot is a fundamentally just incomplete story in some way. Like, it's the either the first chapter of a longer story that we will need to progress through to get all of it, or it is one out of many sort of issues or episodes that could stem from the same base premise. So either you're writing a story that has to leave a bunch of gaps unfilled and a lot of information not yet discovered. That's sort of the premise pilot that we talk about. So premise pilots are just like the first part of a long movie, and we need to understand where it's going from here, and also kind of like what has changed by the end, and we want it to seem like we have completed the first chapter of something and that we are on a clear progression towards a goal. So that means we should have answered some questions, and we should have left some unanswered, some foes undefeated. You can't beat every bad guy. We can't wrap everything up at the end of a premise pilot. Now, a status quo pilot, the other kind, is going to say that this is just one complete story set in this world, and next week there will be another complete story set in this world that's kind of like this one. But you have to more cleanly and completely write it sort of beginning, middle, and end, and wrap everything up as much as you can. So they're both challenging in different ways, but in a premise pilot, you must leave certain questions unanswered and certain objectives unfulfilled, but it should still feel like we are on the road there, and we understand what the road there will look like. So this is where, you know, if we're doing like a Lord of the Rings style thing, we end the pilot with your characters, they crest the ridge of the hills, and they look off in the distance, and there's Mordor off in the distance. We've got a long way to go yet, don't we, Sam? Yes, we do. All right, end episode, off to credits. So that's what it should kind of feel like in a premise show. We should be able to see the destination off in the distance. We know how we're going to get there, but then usually those last couple moments are going to say, but you wouldn't expect this threat to come up next week because, you know, this villain that you thought you defeated in the pilot, guess what? We watched their hand burst out of the earth and grab the ground, and we're like, oh crap, they're coming back next week, and it's about to get a whole lot harder. So that sense of impending escalation is really key for these premise pilots. This idea of we have answered a few questions, but we have now opened up a box of new problems, or we have, you know, a way longer road to travel. That should be really the driving force behind what keeps us coming back week after week. So it should end on the sense that when we pick this up next week, we know where we're going to be, we know what our progress is so far, and we know how much road we have left to travel. It shouldn't generally end on a premise pilot with the sense of, well, I have no idea what we do next, but anyway, see you next week. We want a strong sense of direction and to propel us from the pilot into a potential series that you don't have to worry about. So don't plan too carefully for what your later seasons will be, or later episodes will be. Nobody's going to read another episode besides a pilot, and until you write a bunch of pilots, you're not really going to be good enough at writing pilots to have executed it at the level where anyone's going to want to buy that show. So don't worry too much about anything beyond the pilot, but it should sort of feel like there is more track to go down. The nice thing is you don't have to have all the answers. You don't even have to know what the answers to the ultimate mysteries are, or how we're going to finally get to the end of that mountain, or any of these things. You don't need to know exactly, but it should feel like there is some kind of plan in place there. Amanda has linked the Freaks and Geeks pilot. Thank you for sharing that. So, structure, don't fight with this too much. This is to help you, and TV structure is really, really rigid because we're in a very rigid time slot. In fact, you're writing in an actual time slot, half an hour or full hour. You can't really go above or below it. You have to write to the conventions that we have available to us, and the restrictions that are just a part of this medium, meaning that we are going to have on network TV commercial breaks throughout the episode, probably 3 commercial breaks in half hour, 4, I think, commercial breaks in full hour. It depends on the network and all kinds of things, and obviously with streaming TV nowadays, the act breaks aren't always going to necessarily fall very cleanly on commercials, but you should write with these act breaks in mind and use these act breaks as a tool to keep us turning pages, to keep our interest and excitement, and think of every act break as a sort of, again, a springboard to push us and propel us into the next act with a sense of energy and momentum. So, general thoughts, you can always change things as you are going through it. Generally, you should try to get used to writing and executing what you have planned. But there is room for you to go a little bit off track if you need to. Writing a pilot is, writing any big script is kind of like riding a train that you sort of have to build while it is in motion. So expect to make mistakes and to not get everything just right. And in your successive drafts, you will maybe need to kind of iron out some of these gaps and problems that you've left in the grander narrative that you have just not been able to notice, or you haven't been able to fix in your first pass through it. So get used to that. That's okay. And last, you must read lots of pilots to get really used to what these look and feel like, what a good strong act break kind of looks like on the page, and how to balance things like pacing and tone, and picking strong at nouns and verbs, and just building out the world in an effective way. You absolutely have to read lots of pilots. So half an hour and full hour, you are incentivized to be writing half hour. if you're newer at this, because it's half as much work to do in a way. It's still tricky, and it's like not easy to write a half-hour pilot, but it is half as much writing to do. So if you're on the fence of what do I want to pick, half-hour or full-hour, you should probably pick half-hour, because this is only 30 to 35 pages. Six weeks to write, or I should say really more like 3 weeks, because we spend the first three weeks planning. 3 weeks to write 30 pages is a totally reasonable amount of time. You could write 2 pages a day on just weekdays, and you can finish a 30-minute pilot in 3 weeks. And assuming you've planned it carefully, it shouldn't be a challenge to figure out what happens in those 2 pages. Obviously, executing it is not always going to be the easiest thing ever, but when you have planned properly and you have a clear roadmap out in front of you, writing a half-hour pilot in 3 weeks is very, very doable. So we have Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3, and the weird thing, or the unusual thing, is that in a half-hour pilot, these things are all equidistant, or they take up equal time, as opposed to normal 3-act structure, in which the second act, you can see even here, is substantially longer. But in half-hour, they're actually each 10 minutes-ish long. So we start with your cold open, which you have maybe 2 pages for, and then at the end you have a stinger that you have maybe 2 or 3 pages for. If, we're imagining that you're adding up to a maximum of 35 pages, you can kind of balance it how you want. And it's okay if one of your acts is like a page shorter than the others or a page longer than the others. That happens sometimes. It's not going to like get you exiled right away. But keep in mind that these act limits are pretty strict. We have to manage our pages very carefully and not waste any space or time. So, cold open, you get maybe 2 pages for. That's going to be what we see before the opening credits. It's usually going to set the story in motion in some kind of way. In a procedural mystery kind of show, this is like a murder happens or a crime happens. And then our intro is going to, we go from the cold open crime happening to our title sequence. And then from there on, we go right into intro when we meet who are the detectives that are going to be solving this crime and a different crime every week. We then move into up to your catalyst, which, once we establish the normal world of your protagonist and we see this is how they are all the time. Imagine I'm just going to stick with this procedural crime murder show idea. The intro sequence, so we watch the murder go down. We saw it was a guy who hit his wife with a pool noodle and she died. Oh no, the pool noodles killer has struck again. Or I guess for the first time if it's this is an origin story. We then go to our opening title sequence, CSI, Water Park. And then we go into our intro sequence where we see our lifeguard detectives kind of hanging out, shooting the breeze by the vending machines, and we learn what their different dynamics are at the office. And we are going to sort of just understand what is life at the water park normally like. Until we get to our catalyst where they're going to get that call, there's been a murder at a different water park, and it was a pool noodle slaying. So now that our characters have run into this catalyst, it's not something unusual for them, but it is something that has shaken up their, quote, normal life, which is hanging out and shooting the breeze at the office. So now they're going to have to start their journey in order to solve this crime of the week. So let's say that if our catalyst is we find out, we're given the assignment of solving this murder, trying the locks, your characters are driving to that water park. These are lifeguard/detectives who have to review the case, and they're seeing, oh my gosh, they're reading the files, they're seeing this was the most brutal pool noodle slaying we've ever seen. How could we possibly stop a guy this demented and evil? And then they get to the side of the water park, and they start looking around for clues, and they realize, wait a minute, oh, these clues don't add up. This seems like this pool noodle was wielded by a left-hand assailant, when the killer, our suspect, seems like he's right-handed. It couldn't have been him. So then we're starting to add up all these different clues that make it seem this is going to be harder than we thought. And at the point that we reach our break into 2, it's usually going to ask this question, are we sure we want to proceed? Are we sure we want to take this case? So here maybe your colleague's boss calls in and says, hey guys, if this is too tough for you, like I've got another case you could take instead. But this would be the moment where our main character picks up a scrap of cloth off the ground and sees that in fact this belongs to the pool noodle killer, which was the same killer that's murdered his favorite guinea pig 3 years ago. And now he says, I must go on this journey. I'm going to hang up the phone on my boss and accept the case because I know it's going to be difficult and I have the opportunity to run away. And yet, I must proceed because I have a personal connection now. This guy murdered my guinea pig and now I'm going to stop him from whapping anyone with a pool noodle ever again. This is the dumbest story I've ever riffed off the top of my head. But in any case, our break into 2 will then be, I accept the case and we are now going to have a bit of a cliffhanger as we understand that after this, the investigation is really going to get going. We come back from commercial, and now we're in premise scenes, which are going to be the meat of the investigation. So you might write down 3 or 4 things that people would do in an investigation, right? What do? We interview witnesses, We scour crime scenes for clues. We check with the lab, to analyze chemical samples and DNA and things like that. And then we do action scenes. We are chasing people, we're arresting people, getting into fights, running down dark alleys to hunt down the bad guys, that sort of thing. So imagine like we do one of each of those things in the premise scenes, and we're building up towards catching our first suspect, which is going to be kind of our midpoint, at which point we realize, wait a minute, this guy's wearing a similar cloth bathing suit that I got this scrap of cloth from, but it is in fact not him, and the killer is still out there because we just got a call that says somebody else has been whacked with a pool noodle. So our midpoint is going to represent this time where it seems like a false victory of a way, or in a way where your characters have only increased the stakes by arresting the bad guy, or the wrong guy. Now we can only hold him for a short time, and now we only have a limited time to catch the actual killer. So our escalation is going to be, now that stakes are getting higher, we're increasingly exacting costs on your main characters, because as a result of arresting the wrong guy, now the media is in an uproar. And now this police chief is getting calls all day, so he's putting pressure on our main characters. You have to catch this killer as fast as you can, and meanwhile the victims are racking up. Another person has been whacked by a pool noodle. Somebody else has been whacked. It's just a matter of time until the situation gets completely out of control. Our all is lost moment is going to usually be your characters failed at their goal, or it seems they're on the verge of failing at their goal. So this would be like, we have our suspect, we know who it is, we rush to get him, and we find he's dead. It couldn't have been this suspect. All is lost. It seems we have no more leads left. That's going to push us into your pit of despair, which is where we now have to live in this world that we've failed to succeed. We're going to have to get chewed out by the boss, and he's like, you're a disgrace to the department, hand over your badge and gun. It's only when they're sliding over the badge and gun that they realize, wait a minute, and that something in the room maybe inspires them, or they are able to piece together some clue, or they reconcile with somebody that they had a fight with before, and this is in a big apology sequence of some kind. So maybe this is your character is able to recontextualize some clue that they got at one of the previous crime scenes. And you see this kind of classic cliched example. Somebody's like, wait a minute. The chief will be like, you guys are no good and worn out. And he'll be like, wait, did you just say worn out? Worn out, like clothing. Clothing can be worn out. I think the killer's at the laundromat. That's the sort of classic Batman beating the Riddler kind of like sequence. But you see why that's there, right? Because it has to be a moment that only because of the clues that we've gathered, the people that we've met, and the things that we've learned along the way, now we're going to get what it takes to, whatever the tools that we need to take one last swing at solving the problem and beating the bad guy. So that break into 3 is going to leave us on another cliffhanger. I know who the real killer is. Smash to black. When we come back up from the act break, then we're going to be in your finale, which means probably in our water park murder series, it's going to be an action scene. So we're going to join your detectives as they're rushing to the laundromat to find the killer, and before he whacks somebody else with his pool noodle, he takes a hostage to increase the stakes even more. Our detectives are forced to outwit and befuddle and defeat this villain before he strikes again. Finally, we catch and we arrest the bad guy, and that's going to be sort of the end of our finale. Our stinger is kind of like an epilogue where we say this is what the world holds next for our characters. So usually in a show like this, it's going to be like, thank you. You get a big medal from the mayor or a big key to the city or whatever. And then, or, at least maybe you just get your paycheck for the week. And then we're back to the office where we started. We're still shooting the breeze by the vending machine. And we are, we see maybe even just what one small thing we learned from this thing of the week. If it's a thing of the week show, maybe it's like, hey, that was pretty clever how you figured out the laundromat thing. And the other guy's like, yeah, you know what? Maybe you should trust me a little more with my hunches sometimes. You know what? I think I will. So maybe just some very small development for the characters. TV is about gradual growth of people over time. So maybe in a thing of the week, we want to see how has this thing, this today's incident, what small tool or bit of insight have we gained from this? Or in some cases, like in some comedies, we can subvert that, like in Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and say, what have we sort of completely failed to learn? And that can be funny in its own sort of way. But basically, we just want to know what has changed and what does the world ahead hold for our characters. That's what that stinger is about. Okay, so that was just a breakdown of all the different pieces of just kind of pilot act structure. In the half hour, in the full hour, the times, or you have an extra act or 2 extra acts, and the amount of space and room you get for these things are a little bit different. But I want to just pause so far and see, are there any questions based on me just breaking down the essentials of 3-act pilot structure? All right, seems like no questions. So I'm going to just share these slides so that you guys can review this if you need to. Because for next week, we're going to be writing out story beats. Shall we look at an example? So this is one of my, I guess this is scene cards, isn't it? I don't have story beats on here, but maybe, let me see, do I have story beats somewhere? That might be in my sketchbook. Yeah, I think it would be in this one. So let me just scroll down a little bit through my sketchbook for a pilot that I wrote called Knave, which some people were here for a reading of. So you can see in my first couple pages, it will be things just like research and random lines that I come up with, even if I have no idea where they will be. At the top, of course, we're still including comps, time slot, and your, what do we call it? Time slot and continuity format, genre, we have series logline and pilot logline. That should all kind of be right there at the top. And I like to include an image of header of some kind on my sketchbooks as well. You don't have to do this necessarily, but I just like it. Okay, so you will include all your sort of unsorted notes and ideas for a bunch of pages. Usually this is about 10 pages for me of just those. From then on, I'm going to do several different passes at these story beats. So it looks kind of like this, right? We have our cold open, we have our act 1, and a list of scenes with bullet points next to them. Even at first, I didn't even know what the scenes were. I just sort of decided who was in them. And then every time you do a pass at this, you'll be adding more and more. So you'll be expanding that even longer. Here's my actual story beats. Here's Act 1. So now we can see we're setting up the A, the B, and the C story in these first couple scenes. We're describing what the scenes are just next to a bullet point in about one sentence each. And here we go. It looks basically like this. How many pages have I spent on this? About 2 to 3 pages on just the story beats. A list of the scenes under the proper act heading like that. So you want to list the act. A couple sentences per scene as to what happens. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cards, or 6 scenes in my first act. 1, 2, 3, 4, whoops, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 scenes in my second act. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 scenes in my third act. But some of them are much shorter, so that can kind of work out. So in half an hour, you're basically working at like 5 to 7 scenes per act. So make sure to space out your, bullet points appropriately. Just maybe even write out, give yourself 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 per act. Like that. So you have 5 cards to choose from per act. Just fill those in as best you can. And if you need an extra one, then you can put an extra one down. And just with the assumption that will make some of the other ones shorter. All right, that's how I just kind of balance, and this is how I get started on story beats. Just make a list of these bullet points, right? And you can just physically see this is how many scenes I have to work with. And then if you can just in one sentence summarize what each story beat is, that's great. It doesn't have to be just one. And if you expand a bit more and you add more and more, it'll eventually turn into a scene card. So that can just be a nice way to expand directly from this step to that scene card stage. So that's how I write story beats. That's what they look like and how much detail I include. I think that, just something like this for your first version is totally fine. Let me stop for questions on story beats. Seems like Zach has a question. Go ahead, Zach. So I'm going to put the next slide up. When Zach types his question, I will read it out and take it there. I just want to get this up, which is going to be something to look at for exact page lengths for each section, for each structural beat in half hour. We'll look at full hour after this. So we see we have about 2 pages for cold open, maybe 1 page for stinger. You can have, we have up to 35 pages. So you can pick 1 page for cold open, 4 pages for stinger, or you can pick 2 pages for stinger, 3 pages for cold open. However you want to balance that, that's fine, and you don't have to have either one. If you don't have a cold open or a stinger, then your acts can be like a page or 2 longer each if you want. So Act 1, 10 pages. About intro is going to be 1 to 4 or so. Set up that normal world. Your catalyst is going to be around page 5. Kicks off the story. It's the first major event that's going to tip like a domino into the other dominoes that are going to set your story in motion. Trying the locks, very important sequence, very underused and neglected amongst new writers, but it's my favorite part of the whole script. After the catalyst has happened, now we sort of have to ask, well, am I sure I want to go on this journey? Am I sure I'm ready? Is your character ready for the journey? Is the world ready for them to go on it? Is it impossible for them to even accomplish? And this might be something that, like, we don't, in our water park CSI show, we never really question, are the characters going to try to find the killer or aren't they? But we do, in the Trying the Lock sequence, we're going to emphasize how difficult the journey is going to be, because that's the part where they're driving to the water park, they're reviewing the files, they're investigating the crime scene, they're seeing everything that doesn't add up. All these clues that don't seem like they fit. So we're seeing, oh, this is going to be harder than we thought, is almost like the entire point of Trying the Locks. And it's sort of asking, are you sure that you're up for this? And then our break into 2 is sort of a place where your character says, yes, I am up for this. I'm going on this journey. All right, let me pause and look at Zach's question. So there were only a few words for each story beat. How do you work on the following story beat, or do you have a big picture for the whole pilot already in mind? Are you asking for me personally, or just what I recommend for others to try? Just what I recommend. Okay. How do I work on the following story beat, or do I have a big picture? So let me answer it this way. When you're looking at just the list of bullet points, right, then you have certain stuff that you know is going to be in there because you just filled out 10 pages of sketchbook. So you must have had some scenes or some moments that you just really liked amongst all the sketchbook that you just filled out. So by now you know a couple things that are going to be in the show. So you want to put down whatever you have first. So if you're just looking at this list of 10 bullet points, maybe you're like, okay, ballroom sequence, ballroom dance contest, definitely has to be in there. It'll probably be in the second act. I don't know exactly where, but probably around right there. Then maybe you're like, okay, I know the finale has to be a rooftop fencing match. And I know that the intro is going to be an awkward proposal scene. So start with what you have, like that, and then you can kind of work forward and backward from those things and ask, okay, what would I need to then set up this ballroom dance contest? And you're going to then work up from there and be able to connect it to these other points that you had. So how do I get from one thing that I know I have concretely to the next thing that I know I concretely have? And if you do that with your structure in mind and with, like, a strong knowledge of what each of these moments are supposed to do, then you can connect the dots both forward and backwards to reverse engineer the story for the whole pilot. That's how we break stories usually. Does that answer that question there? He says the forward and backward is really nice. Thank you. Okay, sure, yeah. So I generally am not going just straight linearly beginning to end through it, trying to figure out what happens next. More like we know the cool stuff that is going to be somewhere in the story, and by putting that on the board first, it allows you to work up to those moments and to make sure that we are properly filling in the stuff to connect them. Now, the tricky part, and this is one of the most challenging parts of just writing in general, is making the in-between moments that weren't the initial cool stuff that you thought of just as interesting and cool. But that's where you'll get that's where you will find the magic of those scenes with just proper knowledge of the fundamentals of drama and scene work and things like that, because with those in mind, you can make anything interesting. Okay, other questions on structure stuff we've talked about so far before we go into full hour? Okay, no questions. I think I want to do full hour structure, and then I'm just going to ask who needs help. And if you need a boost forward or you have some question that you haven't resolved so far, then I will just have a moment for us to ask and to do that. I'd rather do that than going in more deeper into structure and hammering all these things home that I've gone over many times before. But let's look at hour-long structure first, and I will just say if you need help, be prepared to formulate your question or your whatever it is that you need to work on in order to get on track. So we'll be looking at that right after we do these slides. All right, full hour. We have the same beats, but we have 5 acts rather than the 3 acts. But 5-act structure. If you carve it up with this line right here and this line right here, then it basically still is, essentially 3 acts. And we have all the same moments throughout these, but think of 1 hour structure more in terms of those act breaks. So we're writing to those act breaks even more, and we have to use each one as a springboard to push us towards that next act, and each one has to invite us and sort of compel us to come back after the commercial ends. So to that end, we can't really have flat act outs. Our last moment in an act has to be something that says, oh crap, I have to come back to see how this plays out because it's going to be too good to miss. If it sort of resolves and it seems like the problem is over, your characters are like, all right, I guess we win. I guess we beat the bad guys. Cool. Well, cool. And then we act out from there. There's no incentive for us to come back after the commercial break is done. Something like that might work on a later episode of, I don't know, that feels like sort of a Futurama or maybe even like a Scrubs kind of tone to me, to just be like, all right, well, it's the end of an act. Nice. And just end it there. That would be funny in a sort of subversive way, but don't do that generally. Normally we have to kind of imply a strong direction that we're going to be taking once we come back, and we are going to end our acts with a sense of urgency and direction and momentum. What do we mean by momentum? We mean story momentum, like your characters know what their goal is, they know how to go about it, and maybe they see that they have a limited amount of time to do it. A ticking clock is going to be a really strong tool to keep us moving through an hour-long pilot. In addition to that, we like to have a strong sense of progress and payoff throughout a story of any length, but especially this becomes very relevant in an hour-long pacing because some people, they kind of forget that they need to be paying things off as we go, not only working up to one payoff that's at the way end. Can somebody explain what we mean by progression and payoff and how to track it?
Is that like setting up a question to be answered, then answering the question, but that leads to more questions. So, for example, like something simple is like someone speaks off screen, and then we turn to reveal who it is.
Sure, that would be like a small version of this, yeah. And I think that what you've just articulated is a good way to tackle something like a mystery type story thread, right? Where if there is some larger mystery that we're working towards solving, you should break that up into smaller mysteries that we can actually understand. Oh, okay, we've solved the first part of this mystery. We've found a clue that led us to our next lead. And that's just a nice way of plotting stories that are based on answering a question as well. We need to answer other questions before we can answer that larger question. So yeah, that's just a great example. That's not the only type of progress and payoff that there is, but that's a commonly used version of this for sure, especially on TV. What about, for instance, like imagine a character is training to get stronger so they can enter a tournament. How would we be able to show that character's progress in a very visual way? Zach says training montage. Sure, training montage. And in a training montage, I think it's helpful if we have visual symbols that show that they are getting better. What would an example be? Have you guys seen Mulan? Zach says, quicker hand speed, bigger weights. Sure, we can show progressively larger weights as they are getting stronger and stronger. In appearance change, sure, so the character is actually looking different. We can see their muscles swelling as they're getting swole enough to defeat the evil.
Succeeding at what they were doing, failing in the beginning, succeeding at the end.
Sure, yeah, definitely.
Of this.
We can do that on the basis of the whole episode, or we can do that just within one montage, right? So if we do the what was she doing in Mulan? Climbing a giant pole, right? Make a man out of you. Go ahead.
With just the montage, there was like loading a cannon, and there was It's like shooting apples into, using a bow and arrow to shoot apples, or carrying buckets of water. But by the end of the montage, she's able to do that.
Yeah, there's tasks that she fails at the start. Good point. And then by the end, we see her succeeding at those. Just a very simple way to show progress. And then, of course, we have the sort of final boss of that sequence, which is this giant wooden post that they have to climb. And then at the end of it, she is sitting on top of it, and she throws the arrow down in front of her superior, like, I did it, I won. So we've seen that character has now officially become stronger. That's just a really essential thing for visual storytelling, is finding visual ways to show us that progress is being made. Now, let's think of a new example. How would we show progress that two people are becoming friends? That's something kind of abstract, right? How do we make it really clear, really visual, and how do we show that progress? Don't include any dialogue in your answers. How do we visually show that people are becoming friends? Body language, okay, sure, we could see that. So maybe this feels a little more intimate to me in a way, but it could be something like we show them at the start sitting on a bench, and then they do some hangout activities. We show another shot of them sitting on a bench. They're sitting closer together, and finally they're, this sounds more like romance, but they're actually, if we're doing a romance progression, we show them doing stuff together, show them sitting closer and closer and closer until they're touching. Sure, we could do that, for instance. Laughing together, that could be an example, yeah, especially if we establish early on, like the laughing together thing would make sense if early on one character makes a joke of some kind, right, and the other person doesn't laugh. And then later we see that they make a joke and that person, cracks up a little bit. I think we see this in The Last of Us really well, don't we? Where every time Ellie makes stupid jokes, at first Joel is just like, no, stop. And then eventually he starts to snicker, and then by the end he's like, you know what I'm in the mood for? Terrible jokes. So we see that really clear progression that way. Any other visual ways that we can show people's relationship? Judea says joking around, shaking someone's shoulder, ruffling their hair. Yeah, we can show people becoming more comfortable touching each other, or more sort of affectionate with each other, definitely. What about two people becoming enemies or starting to hate each other? Don't say beating each other up. Glaring, sure, we see some facial expressions or emotional reactions. Turning their backs to each other, yeah, we might do the opposite of the park bench thing at the beginning, right? Where if every time we see them sitting on a bench together again, we see them scoot slowly further and further away. What else? There's lots of ways to show you don't like somebody even if they're not even around. Anybody watch Succession? How does Shiv show that she starts hating Kendall after his stunt with the loudspeakers? Anybody watch this? No, not one single person watches Succession. Okay. That's all right. So Amanda read the pilot. Oh, Roger watches it. Okay, how did Shiv show that she hates Kendall after his stunt with the loudspeakers? If you remember. It's okay if you don't.
She, on that radio talk show, she says something really awful and humiliating about him. Something like that. He went on a talk show.
I think that's a little later, but I mean, you are right. That does happen for sure. But directly after this, so she is, it's a big deal for her to set up this big press conference kind of thing, and her brother ruins it on purpose to sabotage her, essentially. Afterwards, she goes...
he plays Rape Me on the speakers.
Yeah, exactly. She goes to his office, she finds his fancy leather planner, and just spits in it, then puts it back down. No one else sees it. No one else is around. But it shows us pretty clearly what she thinks of her brother after that, I think. So
you're right.
Very visual, unmissably clear. You would never do that to somebody that you liked. And it's so specific. It feels so specific, it feels like something that has to have really happened, to me at least. I don't know. Every once in a while you see something in a show that you're like, somebody only wrote this in here because it has to have happened. There's a part in, I think, is it Empire? Or I think it's the show Empire, where somebody just puts, their baby is crying so much, they just put their baby in the trash. I was like, that feels too messed up to have been made up entirely. Like,
I do it all the time.
maybe you put your kids in the trash all the time. But for the most part, that was just like, someone must have heard of that happening or something. I don't know. I could just be crazy on that. Oh, it is on Empire. Thank you. It's because the baby's gay? How do you know a baby is gay? What? What a weird idea. Okay. Well, Zach actually watches that show, which I don't actually watch Empire, just to have seen that episode. Anyway, so I hope this is, I'm just trying to emphasize how showing progress is really important, and how flabby, especially the middle of a script, can start to feel if we don't have these really clear markers of progress. And this is what I mean by you have to think very visually in film and TV to show that this progress is being made. Like, let's take the example of, how about you're taming an animal or making an animal become your friend? Well, we could just show the animal's body language kind of changing, and over time, like at the beginning, you try to pet it, it bites at you. At the end, you try to pet it, it allows you to pet it. Sure, that's a simple way of showing this. But let's think of more concrete ways to show the progress. Like, for instance, your character leaves a trail of treats up to their front door. And on the first day, 1 treat is gone. And on the 10th day, 3 treats are gone. And then we can see we are literally halfway. And by that token, what we are doing is we are setting the rule of when all these treats are gone, then the animal will have been tamed. So you are sort of setting your own rules for these scenarios and your own kind of thresholds for success. And it's really key that you do that so that we understand when those thresholds are being overcome or, like, broken through. Think of like the line of treats up to the animal. Earning an animal's trust is a little bit of an abstract thing. It's like, how do we know we've done that? Well, we have set the rule that we know we've done that when 10 treats have been eaten. So use that tactic, use that as technique to set your own visual rules for how will we know something is completed, even if that thing is kind of abstract. If it's something like, I need to fix my relationship with my dad. Well, okay, my dad collects seashells, and when I was a kid, I stole a bunch of seashells from him, and I feel bad for it, so now I've been replacing them one by one. And now, as that bucket gets filled up with seashells, we see that their relationship is improving. I've just made that up off the top of my head, but like you can see how that could be just a very simple tool to see that progress is being made. And then maybe at a certain point something tragic happens. They have a big fight and somebody dumps the seashells onto the ground. And then it starts to act not only as a marker of progress, but as a clear visual symbol for that relationship. Any other questions on plot, progress, and this sense of kind of like visual markers of progress? My headphones should be working again. Okay, I think I'm going to first of all connect these headphones. Did we connect properly? There we go. Now that we're through the major structure stuff, I'm just going to ask, who needs help? Who needs to get on track? Amanda asks for the logline. I mean, for anything. If you feel that you need to have some gaps filled or some questions answered to get on track for your pilot to move to the next step, which is story beats, then now's the time. We have 35 minutes left in class. Roger has spoken up first. I could use logline review. All right, let's do that.
Here they are. Well, if it's okay, I put 2 pilot log lines.
Sure.
Like, I have 2 options.
Okay. Okie doke. So, premise pilot. Okay, here's the series logline. Here's the pilot, and here's the alternative pilot. Okay, let's just read them straight through. Why don't you start with the first one?
Okay, the series or pilot?
We'll just start at the top. So start with series, then we'll go to pilot.
Sure. To save their jobs and pensions, human employees at a behemoth tech company must up their game when their megalomaniacal CEO introduces the world's first line of sentient robot employees.
Nice. Okay.
Here are my 2.
Go ahead.
Okay. My 2 pilot log lines. Sorry, I did 2. Okay.
You're
After
fine.
being denied a promised promotion, a townie factory worker and his human coworkers frame the company's new sentient robot employees for the disappearance of a Make-A-Wish kid.
Oh, okay.
Or, after being denied a promised promotion, a townie factory worker attempts to murder one of the company's new sentient robot employees, but shoots a fellow human instead.
Whoa, okay. This is darker than I thought it would be.
That's kind of who I am, so I could always use help dialing back on that too.
Oh, you don't have to. I mean, people dark humor is popular and funny, so if that is where you naturally go, then no need to pull back too far. But let's look at the series.
Well, I did pull back on my one where the guy denied the promotion, shows up dressed as a robot and says he's now identifying as a robot.
I think that's funny. I don't think it's too far.
Oh, okay.
Let's look at series logline. So, to save their jobs and pensions, human employees at a behemoth tech company must up their game when their megalomaniacal CEO introduces the world's first line of sentient robot employees. Okay, this has all the relevant information in it, but it just feels like we have two clauses when we have a clause that's like, to do this, they need to do this when their management does this, when it should be more like, when their management does this, human employees must blah 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 to blah blah blah. So I think maybe you've put the thing that needs to come first a little bit later. So maybe try this. When their megalomaniacal CEO introduces the world's first line of sentient robot employees, human employees at a behemoth tech firm must up their game to save their jobs and pensions.
Nice.
Okay, so easy switch there. Pilot logline. All right, so we have two different options. One in which I guess you're saying in both cases our main character is simply one of the factory line assembly line workers.
Yes, and I imagine he convinces the other people that, hey, my job, I lost my promotion today, or maybe he's even laid off and saves his job in the pilot, but like, you guys are next, and convinces the even smarter fellow employees that like, we need to take down these robots before they take down all of us.
Right.
Plotting against us.
I get it. Okay. And his way of doing that is we're going to frame the new employees for the disappearance of a Make-A-Wish kid. So was a Make-A-Wish kid's wish to tour the factory or something?
Or to meet the CEO, who is Elon Musk. Let's say,
to meet the CEO.
On Elon Musk.
Okay.
Yeah.
And maybe he's like, I want to meet the robots too, and they're like, all the human
or
employees.
to drive a Tesla before the kid dies.
Oh, sure. Okay. This is I like this idea. Then I see how the Make-A-Wish kid connects to the rest to this world, and why framing him would accomplish their goal. So I like the first one a lot. I just want to review the second one really quick. After being denied a promised promotion, a tiny factory worker attempts to murder one of the company's new sentient robot employees, but shoots a fellow human instead. Okay, that sort of more feels like your show is going to be about the humans sort of creating the problems for themselves, or like creating messes that like are they kind of bumbling and incompetent humans, I guess would be my question.
I'm so glad you asked. I watch a lot of Big City Greens, and the little boy Cricket seems to create a lot of his own episodes through his own just being this hilarious, bottle rocket of a boy. You can do that. I actually wasn't sure that you asked. That's a brilliant question. I don't know.
But let's think of this, though. So could that episode take place in a world where there were not robot employees? It sounds like yes. Because if the problem is... So let's just pretend like this is just your factory worker got promoted, like somebody else got the promotion instead of him, so he decides to frame his coworker for the murder of this other human. And now, in the process, he murders a fellow human, or he murders somebody, the wrong person, and he... he's not framing anyone in this one. He's just trying to murder the competition, but he ends up killing the wrong person instead. So this
shooting the wrong person, and then says, no, he's just dressed as, that's not a real human. He's a crisis actor robot. That's fake blood.
Okay, but the episode would mostly be about him trying to, like, I guess, hide the body and get away with the murder?
Something like that, yeah.
Okay, it just doesn't feel like it's... I could maybe see this as a later in the season episode, but for a pilot, we probably want to get to the root of the problem, or the heart of this issue here, which might be, we could say, these robots are dangerous, right? And if we say, or the robots don't have the same decision-making capabilities that we have, in which case framing one of them for a child getting hurt makes a lot of sense as to why that would be the pilot, because it's just taking our sort of most key problem, which is the robots are dangerous, and we're using that as the basis of our argument against them. So I think the first one makes a lot more sense, whereas the second one feels like it could exist in a world without these robots. I think the first one takes better advantage of the factors of the elements that you have.
Great.
And then, of course, you can use this to touch on all kinds of interesting topics, like, do these factory line robots abide by Asimov's 3 laws? I don't think so, do they? Or like any of these other kind of robot safety things that are in the public consciousness nowadays, thanks to AI and self-driving cars and all these questions about robots and ethics and morality, I can see how those could be easily evinced and explored in this first pilot, or in that first option. Whereas the second one feels like it's more about the human's problem, and a problem that he's essentially creating for himself. Doesn't feel like we'd have to really interact with the robots to solve this problem.
Okay, but he is also creating the problem in the Make-A-Wish one if he's the one kidnapping the kid.
Oh, he does kidnap the kid.
Yeah, I was thinking that'd be funny, but I hear what you're saying, that like, oh no, wait, they do. I think what you're saying is no, just have them do it. Like, they're the problem.
You could. I mean, I guess for the first one, I was thinking that the kid went missing somehow, and then it seems like you're saying your main characters would just take advantage of the situation to blame the other ones. If you're saying that they actually are kidnapping the kid, you should maybe frame that pilot logline a little bit differently. So it's not just...
Well,
go ahead.
What makes more sense, though, I think you're saying, though, that them taking advantage is actually...
Yeah, what if they take the kid on a trip or something, and while they're out, the kid just goes missing, or, people lose track of him? It's possible to do. If Elon Musk is in charge of the field trip, I'm sure the kid could go missing. And then while he's gone, I mean, it seems like you could just use that situation to their advantage. I don't think they would have to kidnap the kid in order to make this one work. But if they are going to... Go ahead.
You're saying the humans lose the kid, not the robots. What you're saying still.
No, I think my understanding was that the humans were not involved in the disappearance of the kid, but the fact that he did disappear, they're going to now use to blame on the robots. But
yeah, it just seems... If you wanted to blame the robots, though, I feel like humans should go look for the kid, and if you wanted to blame the robots, you might not want the kid to be found, which kind of butts up against each other.
That's true. I mean, that could be sort of part of the development of the episode, right? They're like, we're going to go form a search party. Then they go out and they actually do find him. They're like, crap, now we have to... hey, let's have an extended wilderness trip, kid, and let's keep you out here for a while so we can take full advantage of the situation or something like that. So there's lots of ways that you can play this, but I guess I would just say if part of the challenge is we have to kidnap this child, then I would frame it more in those terms in the logline. So it would be, after being denied the promotion, the factory worker and his human coworkers kidnap a kid to blame on the robots rather than they just frame them, because otherwise it's not clear who actually did it.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
Okay, questions?
Yeah. That's great. Thank you. No, that's great. Very helpful.
Thanks, Roger. And in the chat, we have some interesting moral questions from Zach and Willow. How would a human frame a robot? Whom are we rooting for? I'm kind of rooting for the robots. These humans terrify me. I mean, yeah, that could be part of your fun as well. Like the fact that we come to realize by the end, maybe the robots aren't that bad, and the humans are just kind of freaking out over nothing, and they're really the kind of villains here. It's up to you how to play it.
That's why I started thinking that maybe the robots are the good guys, and yeah, I've gotten a little turned around and what all these possibilities, what's best, but
yeah, it's fine. Like, I would also think in comedy, it's fine to have a villain protagonist. Like, think of Always Sunny. Every episode is villain protagonist, and we love those characters. So you can have in comedy, you have this unique opportunity to have characters that are selfish, that are short-sighted, that are impulsive, that are constantly causing trouble for themselves and everyone around them. But as long as they're funny, we will forgive them.
Okay, that makes it a lot easier to do. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks for sharing. Who else needs help? Or has questions? Amanda says maybe we'll look at her beats if there's time. There is time.
I'm still working on it. I don't know if I think it might be a little too rough. If there's no one else, I'll go through something, but let's see if there's anyone else.
Sure, I can come back to you if you want. I have a question from Zach. The background stuff I did for Knave is very interesting. Be interesting to know what I put in there. Sure, we can go over just the background and gathering I did for Knave if you want. So for those who were not there for it, this was the half-hour dark comedy historical pilot that I wrote about a court jester who pulls the strings to keep things running smoothly in the court of a foolish king. Thus the title, sort of. We're sort of asking who is the knave here? Who is the real fool? Is it the licensed fool, or is it the king? In the pilot, the fool stumbles on a conspiracy to overthrow the king, brewing amidst the night staff of the castle, which is a plot he must infiltrate and neutralize from the inside. So, to this end, I knew the whole time that this was going to be a little bit more theatrical. Although it would take place in a historical setting, I didn't really want to anchor it too closely to one point in history. I didn't want to make that kind of too much a focus of the show. I didn't want to have to think about real-world politics, and in fact wanted to kind of remove that sense of real-world politics from this. So we're not really in medieval England, and we're not really in the high Middle Ages or whatever, but it sort of kind of feels like that. I just wanted to refer to it in more genericized terms so as to keep the focus on the spotlight on the characters themselves. And so some movies do this too in a nice way. I think the movie Beasts of No Nation, I know it's a totally different genre, but it's a similar sort of story in that they deliberately don't say where it's taking place to kind of just make it feel like it could be any conflict in a country like a third world country like this. This could be any war like this. So I sort of wanted to do the same thing and say, is this England? Is this medieval Germany or Poland or something like that? Maybe. It's medieval Europe somewhere. So to that end, I didn't actually do too much historical research on specific eras or dates or times. All my research that I was doing was going to be on the specifics of, like, how do people do certain things in these eras? Like, what does it look like? How do the lower classes live? What does the servants' quarters look like? What are the jobs and responsibilities of the help and the entertainment in the castle? And I kind of turned my focus of this information gathering to the minutia of day-to-day life rather than grander, bigger elements of the world building that you might think. So I would look up things like, what were the different areas of a castle, and maybe what would those areas look and feel like, and what would be in them? Where does the knave stay? Where are different people's chambers in the castle grounds? Some characters have very interesting kind of roles that are sort of halfway between the upstairs and the downstairs. The upstairs being the nobles and the royalty, the people in charge, and the downstairs being the servants, basically. And like the knave, for instance, occupies a very interesting middle ground between those two things. So I thought that was cool to look into. I did a lot of research on the different rooms of the castle and the different places that I'd want to explore to get the full sense of the tactile physicality of this place. I mean, you want to think like the roofs are leaking, there's birds that get inside the castle, there's like wild animals that get in sometimes, there's it's a cold and drafty place. It's got lots of different sub-locations within it. Each one has its own sort of atmosphere and lighting and look and feel to it. We have the curtain wall, the gatehouse, bailey, stables, bakehouse, and inside there's many different rooms too. I wanted to, as much as possible, have this all take place within the same castle, and because of that, had to take absolute full advantage of all the different rooms that we would have access to. Bedchambers and boudoirs, and what is the difference between that? Is it boudoir? I actually don't know how to pronounce that. In any case, so a lot of this was just figuring out, how does life in a castle work from day to day? Who are the different important people there, and what would their kind of roles be in relationships to each other? I wasn't really looking at historical events or rulers or dynasties or anything like that. I was looking at the smaller scale. What is day-to-day life like? And also, of course, just taking bits and pieces of what I would call courtly wisdom. So I wanted to work through, the idea behind this story was to have a character that is very well-versed in what I call courtly wisdom, which is kind of the various little sayings and pieces of advice and guidance that the advisor of a king would just have access to from many years spent around rulers and able to see all their mistakes and all the things that they do wrong day by day. So in reading books and historical articles and things like this, I would just gather little sayings and little aphorisms, and I would find ways to rephrase them so that my characters can put their own spin on it and sort of think of it in their own terms. I didn't even get to use absolutely everything. There were some that I didn't get to, but I just took a lot of quotes. C.S. Lewis was a really good source of quotes for this, and just took these little bits of courtly wisdom and put them in the mouths of the characters in their own ways. Didn't really get to this. I kind of wanted to find a place to bring up this idea of personalization distorting the value of property, which I thought was very cool and is something that not a lot of people think of. But here, I'm just going to say this because as we wait for somebody else to bring up a question or any help that they need. But a lot of people think that if they get very wealthy, their idea of value kind of distorts in the sense that they're like, I got this multi-million-dollar house and I spent $25,000 on a cigar bar. Of course that's going to massively increase the value of my house, right? But then they go to sell it and they realize that nobody wants to buy a house that has a $25,000 cigar bar in it, because that's not something that they value. That's something that the original owner valued. And now that it's there, it becomes harder to get rid of. And the things that were important to you are so unimportant to the next person that you think that it will be worth more than it really is. I always just thought that was an interesting way of kind of like looking at how people's minds of different wealth levels work. And I wanted to find a way to get that into the show. I didn't find a way to, but these are the sort of examples of like bits of wisdom that I wanted to find ways for the characters to articulate. Zach says he's having to do the exact thing with his parents' house. Oh god, did they put in a bunch of stuff that only appeals to them? Now you have to put in work to get rid of it? That's so funny. Alright, so, with that digression aside, let me open the floor. Who needs help of any kind? Zach says there's a 60s vinyl player in a cabinet. Does that come with the house? Or maybe it's non-removable. Oh, you want to get rid of it. Value of £10. Okay. For a vinyl player from the 60s? Dang. Just £10 for that? What a shame. All right, floor is open. Does anyone need help of any kind with their logline or story beats or brainstorming or questions they have on anything we've talked about today?
Oh, no, go ahead, Paul.
Thank you. Yeah, I had a question about coming up with, like, I guess more creative problems for the characters to kind of face in like a show that's supposed to go on for a while, right?
More creative problems for your characters to face.
Yeah,
this is probably going to come down to having a better villain, but go ahead, you can elaborate more if you'd like.
Yeah, like I guess like if I'm having problems in coming up with more things to happen over a long period of time, you know what I mean?
Meaning a whole hour, or you mean like over years of a show?
Yeah, over years of a show.
Okay. Well, because we're only writing pilots here, we don't have to come up with what... The nice thing is you can release yourself of having to do that, which is the nice thing of doing this is we don't have to have the answers. You don't have to know anything beyond even like a kind of vague idea of the first season. But like when you are pitching a show, you're going to have pilot. If the pilot is an absolute knock out of the park amazing script, maybe people will ask to see a show Bible, and that will include like maybe a couple ideas for later episodes in the season, or if it's a premise-based show, you're going to basically give us the trajectory of the first season and maybe like a sentence each on like the next 3, I guess, if you really want to. But you really don't have to solve those problems at this stage for the most part, which is that's the nice thing. But to give a better answer, I would say this is probably going to come down to your villain. And the fact, if you can't come up with interesting and tough enough problems for your heroes to have to overcome, you probably haven't chosen a villain that's formidable enough. Or is the problem that you don't have a central villain?
It's not like a central villain over the course of this thing.
It's not. Okay, so what's the conflict?
It's sort of like a bunch of different factions up against one another.
Okay.
I guess now that I'm thinking about it, I could make like them all sort of led by certain characters who are each other's villains.
You could.
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I would maybe think of it. If you're saying it's an ensemble, I guess.
Yeah, sort of like a Game of Thrones type thing.
Okay, well, yeah, those characters are directly opposing each other, even if there's not like a bad guy, right? Because everyone's kind of bad if you're doing it like that. But they have people that they have enemies, even if there is not a villain for the show. So chances are you need to make their enemies more formidable. And if their enemies are more clever and are more competent and are more powerful in a way, it's going to force your characters to become more creative to solve those problems. Basically, you want to come up with the impossible situation first. You know, they're laying siege to our castle. They have 100 catapults and 5 trolls and 5 giants on their side. I don't see any way that we can defeat the siege with force of arms. Well, it's going to force your characters to then come up with a different solution that's not force of arms, right? And it may require characters with different skill sets to come to the forefront, and maybe our only negotiator that we have access to is a terrible negotiator, right? It's a drunken king. How is the alcoholic king going to possibly negotiate his way out of this one? Well, we're going to have to tutor the king in diplomacy. See how just by creating an impossible situation to solve and giving your characters inadequate tools to solve it forces you to not only come up with solutions, but to come up with solutions that would be great scenes.
Yeah.
So that's my just basic guidance there is if you aren't coming up with interesting problems for your characters, chances are the forces they're up against are not strong enough or competent enough or intelligent enough.
All right, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure, I hope that's helpful. Let's reopen the floor to help, questions, topics from anyone. Brainstorming, fixing loglines, fixing gaps in your project, any other issues. We've gone over structure today, so now basically you need to write out your story beats for next time and turn in finish as complete a version of them as you possibly can. It's probably going to be about 3 pages. I guess I'll just leave the homework slide up. So for next time, story beat summary, and really actually read a script. Let's look at, is this your sketchbook, Amanda?
Yeah, outline now.
Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah.
You want to look at this?
Yeah.
Are you still there?
So I just have the log line there, and then so I'll just, it's not in quite nice enough format to have you, to make you read it through it. But I'm circling back to kind of my original idea for the log line, which is that it's more about, the first episode is more about her figuring out how to stay clean, and like the dark night of the soul will probably be a relapse. And then the finale will be her finding the unplugged club. So the cliffhanger will kind of be like she meets these really quirky, kind of otherworldly, offline kids. And like maybe the goal that she's trying to achieve in this first episode, she doesn't achieve it, but she finds this club, and now maybe she'll achieve it, like some sort of cliffhanger. So let's see.
Wait, I'm sorry. So you're saying that she doesn't even meet the other characters until when?
Till the end.
She doesn't even meet the cast of the show until the end? Then who do we even have in the show?
Well, so she's okay. Well, I was gonna have her go to like the therapist and then the 12-step program. Maybe, well, let's see. Maybe what you said, maybe the characters, I know, maybe the club that she forms are with 3 other girls that are going to the 12. They're not actually addicts, but they don't have anywhere else to go to be with other people that are offline. The only people that are offline that they found are the ones that are in the 12-step program. It would be like, I mean, it'd be the equivalent. And if this is like a wacky animated comedy, it would be like the equivalent of someone, it's really silly, but like someone who doesn't drink, right? Just because they don't drink, or they're allergic to alcohol. And they can't find any friends that don't drink, so they go to AA meetings because they want to hang out with other people that don't drink. Like, that's sort of silly, but that would be like her friend. That's what?
I said that's kind of a bummer, but maybe I guess that could be good in a way. if you're
Maybe that's how she meets them. I mean, I mean, it can be as wacky as I want it to be if I get in right. If as long as it's in character to the tone of the show. So maybe. So what happens is so my thinking is that the catalyst is an intervention. The intro status quo. We actually get kind of like a bit of a montage of how her addiction accumulated, and then she like is just sort of not quite comatose, but there'll be some sort of, she has like credit card bills of investing in all these things for building some social media platform, and she's in debt and she's isolated from her friends now because she's so addicted. And then maybe her parent, somebody intervenes. Trying the locks is she's trying to quit. So first she tries cold turkey. Then she tries maybe some sort of therapy. And then she finds the 12-step group. And the 12-step group is how she gets clean. So the break to 2 is life without the internet. So life before the internet is before Act 2. And then Act 2 is life after the internet. Life offline. I know it's a weird way to set it up, but
it's really probably a mistake to not introduce your main characters in the first act. So that would be if you're.
So she would meet them at the AA meeting.
Oh, she.
I mean,
okay.
At the 12-step meeting. Yeah, she'll meet them in the 12-step meeting.
Okay.
Good call. Right. Yeah. So she'll meet them, but maybe. Yeah, I mean, and I just need to remind myself it can be really funny, right? So there's these 3 people who aren't actually addicts, but they're just trying to find people that are offline. And so they go to this 12-step program for social media, internet addicts.
Sure.
I don't know. It could happen right? BoJack Horseman, a horse is dating a human, and we say, okay, we'll give you that one,
Or it
so
could be maybe like after the meetings are done, they all go to the cafe next door, and that's where the characters hang out. And
exactly.
Like, they just realize that this is a good place to hang out with non-internet people or something. Or maybe it's
right.
Maybe the meetings take place at like a Zen garden or something like that they just like also patronize. What I think would be useful for you, we don't have to do this if you don't want to do this, but my suggestion is that I just write out how I think the story would go, just using my first assumptions. You don't have to use any of this, but I'm just going to like show you how I would just write through it in 10 minutes really quickly and just write out the whole structure, and then you can use whatever from that you want. Would that be useful for you?
Sure.
Okay. So this is not, you do not have to commit to using even one word of this, but I'm just going to go through and plot this.
Oh yeah, so wait, before you write on anything, so the rest of this is the sketchbook, and that I made a copy, but I forgot to delete. Let me delete everything after this initial outline, so you don't have to wade through all that.
Okay, I just need a blank page. I don't need too much.
Yep, there we go. Yep.
Okay, so let's start. I know this is kind of late to be doing this in the class, so we might go just a little bit over. But if you guys want to stick around and see this, I mean, nobody else seemed to have any problems or questions, so you know what the homework is for next time. Story beat summary, read a pilot script, and be ready to talk about it. I'm just going to go through Amanda's pilot and write out how I would plot it. You can, of course, feel free to stick around and watch if you want. All right, so let's write out what we have. Oh, do I have editing access? Can I get editing access?
Sure. Yep. Editor. Okay. Yeah. I think you should have editing. Are you able to edit now?
Yeah, looks like it. Okay, so we'll write down. Whoop. Did I zoom in too much? Here it is.
There we go. I can see it now.
Okay. So we have Act 1. Whoops. Act 2. Act 3. And let's put down our bullet points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 5 bullet points under each act.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. I remember we did this with my other pilot, too, with the wizard, the alcoholic wizard. I am a little caught on these alcoholic characters. Oh, okay.
So I'm just going to go straight through, and I might stop to ask you questions now and again. It's okay if this isn't close to your actual vision of this. I just want to do this for the purpose of getting from beginning to end and showing you how I would introduce everything.
Right.
Okay, so let's make this a little bigger. And we will, let me just start at the top here. Okay. I know I just said all this about how you need a villain. In this show, you may not exactly need one, but in this, we need to make sure the problem is bad enough. All right, so I'm just going to go straight through. I'm not going to think too hard about this or spend too much time making this good, but I'm just going to sort of do my best. All right, so let's look at the things that we know we need to have. So main character, oops, why does it keep doing that? What is your main character's name?
Say MC for now.
Okay. I don't really want to call them MC, so we'll just pick, how about Marley? That starts with an M. I don't know. We're just going to pick a name. Okay. So let's see Marley at a low point. She's, we see the worst of her internet, or what do we call it, social media addiction. She rides home on the bus. Everyone is talking about summer plans. She's just obsessively refreshing Instagram, etc.
Yeah.
Doesn't have any plans coming up for the summer. They're like, what are your plans? She's like, right here. What are your plans? What do you mean? Points at phone. That sort of thing. Comes in, or she's, all excited about, or she keeps refreshing again and again to see if some post she got liked by the person that she wanted to like it or something like that.
Yeah.
She comes inside. All right, let's actually sort of make this the same scene. She comes home. The person whom she wanted to like her post has unfollowed her. She has a breakdown. Okay, we're then going to skip ahead to, or let's make that your cold open. So then we do opening credits. And when we return, it's going to be like a couple weeks or maybe like a few months. Let's say it's the start of the new school year. So start of new school year. And, after months of therapy, or let's just do a scene. I'm just going to pick the generic choices for now. You can make this more specific as you need. But we'll say Marley with mom at breakfast table. After a year of therapy, are you ready to start making some big changes? And she's like, yeah. And, breaks phone. Then we go to school, and we see now she's going to have to live. Now she's going to commit to not being online anymore. She tries to get through a day. Everyone is gossiping about stuff they have seen online. Some new streaming show everyone is referencing. A big party coming up in the woods. And let's maybe just backfill a little bit, and we'll say that the one she wanted to like her post was some guy that she likes. Let's just pick.
That's what I actually have going. That's actually the thing that I was going to have. That's funny. I mean, not funny, but yeah, that's exactly what I was going to do, is have it be related to a guy. And that's how, yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to call him Chad for now because it's the dumbest name ever. And it's
Chad, I was going to have it be Todd.
Okay. So a big party coming up in the woods, or let's say Todd is throwing a big party, bonfire party. She finds out she must learn where it's going to be, but then learns it will only be shared on Snapchat. So then we're going to meet the other characters, and we're probably going to want to have gotten glimpses of them through these first couple scenes. We're going to want to have like a moment with one of them on the bus. Community does this really well. We kind of bump into the other characters on our way to gathering them all together, but we're going to really gather them all together at the end of the first act. Okay, so in this case, I guess we're mostly saying that I'm kind of saying that your character has already gone through a bunch of therapy and counseling before, or like during the time skip, that we didn't actually see it. Maybe now and again you can have brief flashbacks to it, but in any case, she is committed to this journey of I'm going cold turkey. Cold turkey is how she's going to approach this year. This is the year of healing, the year of me. So that's how she's going to kind of approach this. But then the first thing she learns is that, oh my God, the party that I have to go to is only being organized on Snapchat. So then she's very devastated to learn she's basically not going to be able to find out where it is. She starts asking around, trying to solve the problem. Maybe the people she approaches about solving the problem are these other characters in this group. So for let's just say she goes to like the school, I don't know, the school hippie, sure. Offline. She approaches the school hippie and asks, you can find out and inform me where the party is going to be, right? You're into parties. You're cool. And she's like, no, I'm actually offline. In fact, I'm part of, me and my friends are all totally offline. Interesting. Maybe we can have fun without the party, she suggests, and maybe our main character is kind of reluctant at first, but she gets dragged along to this gathering of the offline people. So I guess in this version, I'm sort of suggesting that your main character is dragged to this thing at first, but then maybe kind of becomes the heart and soul, or perhaps even organizer of it. Or maybe it's an unofficial, it's just like a group of friends at first. But then from here, she's like, oh, now that I understand, wait a minute, none of you guys use online stuff? Holy crap, I know what we can do instead of the party. This will distract me from it. She organizes it into an official school club with a... don't they have chaperones for school clubs? Chaperone, classroom, official meeting times, etc. And she's like, guess what, everybody? This is the first official meeting of the non-online people.
Unplugged.
Of the Unplugged committee, or whatever. Yeah, okay. And then at the end of the act, of course, we want to have that sense of propulsion and conflict that will springboard us into the next act. So I'm not sure exactly what that is yet, but just make sure we'll find some kind of small cliffhanger. Let's move directly into Act 2. But do you see how we've done this sort of community thing? We've met the group at the end of Act 1, and now we're going to sort of ask, what are they going to get up to, or how are they going to solve their problem in the rest of the show? So Act 2, I'm just going to power through it. I'm not thinking too hard about this, so you can change whatever you need to make this actually work. So let's brainstorm activities we can do entirely offline. And that'll just be a fun, let's all introduce ourselves and say your favorite offline activity to do. Not drugs. That isn't drugs.
But when the kids start doing virtual reality stuff, they're going to take mushrooms.
Okay. Sure. But I imagine that for our very first meeting, they probably want to be more careful about. They'd be a little more careful, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we're going to get to know everybody in the group, introduce yourself, say your name, and what's your favorite offline thing to do. That would just be a nice way to meet all the characters. Get to know the club. And then we're going to run into this problem of, hey, it seems like we can maybe be friends. Well, yeah, actually, let's maybe send them out on their first kind of outing. They do something unbearably lame at first. I don't know. How about knitting in a field? I'm just picking a thing.
That's fine. Yeah.
Some people might not think that's very lame, but in any case, let's pick knitting in a field. And as they're knitting in a field, they watch a bunch of convertibles drive by of popular kids.
And the addict keeps wanting to take pictures of the knitting because she keeps forgetting, that
sure.
She's not going to be able to post them.
Sure, yeah, you forgot to put your phone in the lockbox for today's meeting. So we're out knitting in a field. We're like, okay, guys, I think this might be lame. I think what we're doing might be fundamentally lame. And at that point, your main character is going to say, no, she's going to see those kids driving by in those convertibles to go to that cool pool party, and she's like, no, you know what? This isn't lame. We just aren't picking the right activities. We need to pick something cooler. Let's hike to the top of a mountain. For a camping trip. Guys, nobody goes camping anymore. This could be so fun. We live in the middle of Manhattan or wherever it is that they live. So, we never get the chance to do this. This will be such a good bonding activity. Convinces everybody we're going to go ahead to the mountaintop for a camping trip. So let's go ahead and send them off doing that. They're like, okay, forget the party. We suit up. We head into the mountains. Wouldn't this be easier with Google Maps, etc.? Yes, it would, but we don't care. So they obviously they navigate to this,
And they're gonna get lost. Well, they could get lost.
Yeah, exactly. So first things first, we have to get to the camping site. We're already lost, and you're saying we can't even bring up GPS. Your main character's like, that's right. We have to commit. We committed to this. But we're lost, ... And then let's just end with them lost in the woods at the end of this act. So we get to, they're like, are you sure this is the campsite? It's like a creepy old Evil Dead cabin. They're like, yeah, I think this is it. We walk into the woods a little ways. We're like, I don't see a trail. And then maybe we see fireworks in the distance. Oh my god, they said there'd be fireworks at the lake party. They must be having so much fun over there. Because Chad is a firework salesman or specialist or something like that. He goes out of town to get the coolest fireworks. They see them off in the distance, some reminder of the fun they could be having, and then they realize, holy crap, we are totally lost. Okay, so Act 3, we start with them in the woods. And so our main character is going to start by saying, no, we're not lost. Let's just have our fun here. Let's just make a little fire on our own. Make a little fire. We don't need a campsite. Make our own campsite. It's just miserable. We don't need bug spray. We'll make our own bug spray. We're geniuses. We have, people got by for thousands of years without any bug spray, right?
Yeah.
So we turn it into like a little camping trip. She's like, okay, I don't have a guitar, but I can make my own guitar. Guys, isn't it creative and fun the way that I'm tackling this problem? And so we're basically miserable, shivering in the woods. And this is going to lead to a sort of crisis moment for your characters. And we're basically going to want to work towards this all is lost very early on, right? So let's just lead from shivering in the woods right to your kind of all is lost moment, which is going to be one of these characters says, this sucks. We can't just live without the internet ever. We actually might die without it today unless we get back to civilization. We're screwed, but your main character insists. So Marley insists, we have to do this. We have to stick this out. Are we unplugged or aren't we? And they have to, raise a bunch of reasonable objections to this, and this argument is going to leave with this question of, can this club stay intact? Is it possible? This is the all is lost. Now we're going to go right into your pit of despair, so it's only going to be one scene in half an hour pilot like this. So our pit of despair is your main character on the verge of relapse. So maybe it's something like one of them goes and wanders off on her own and is like, I'm leaving, and your main character has to rush after her. She gets even more lost. She's chasing someone in the woods, gets even more lost, and realizes I will have to either now use my phone or maybe lose my friend.
Right.
And this might be a nice moment where we kind of, we can put something up a little bit earlier and retroactively fill in something where she's like, studying Girl Scout survival techniques or something like that. Or maybe there's some little thing that she needs to remember or learn or reconcile at this point. Basically something some truth that she's been kind of avoiding up until now. I'm not sure what the answer is yet. But whatever it is, your main character, let's say Marley, Marley remembers or reconciles with something. As a result, she knows how to find and rescue her friend, or I don't know, get them water to drink before they die of dehydration or whatever it is in the in this crisis scenario. So she rushes to save her friend, and now they are going to crash the lake party to show them all how much fun they had without them. Or maybe it could be something like, while we're in the woods, we see that the fireworks are starting to cause a forest fire. They're starting to cause a problem, and now we need to rush to the party to warn them to stop setting those off. So we have some urgent reason we need to now. We want to go and meet up with the other kids again at the end. So maybe it's like, the sparks are risking a forest fire. We will have to rush back and stop the other kids. And your finale is going to be, we gather the team.
Maybe something that they have that's offline related allows them to put out the fire. I don't know what that is, but
that's a good point.
Something that only you'd have if you're trying to live an offline life. Like maybe I mean this is a different, you know, this would change other beats, but like, you know, they actually have the paper maps to start a fire. Like if they were freezing, right? Let's say they were freezing and they're like, oh my God, we actually have paper to light, you know, if we hadn't, you know, gone offline, we wouldn't have had this. We wouldn't have been able to solve the problem that was caused by the offline. But anyways.
Probably a better idea than burning them would be something like, you know, the GPS doesn't have the old routes on it, though, does it?
Right.
Where is our friend? Oh, she must have gone into the old mine that's only marked on the paper maps. Holy crap, there is a value to the old-fashioned way. So that is what you're sort of, that's the thematic point of your whole show, that there's some value in doing things the old-fashioned way without the internet.
Right.
We saw the ways that it made their life harder, but then ultimately we're going to come to see the ways that it is still valuable and worth preserving this way of life too. Maybe they run into some Amish people or some hermits out in the woods, and that could be a nice kind of break into three, and it could be like, you know, your main character runs the risk of becoming this old hermit at the end of the day, but maybe he can help them, or maybe he can show them something. In any case, that might just be something to think about. Let's just go to the finale though. Main character gathers the team. Puts them, gets them back to the car, and they rush to stop the kids setting off fireworks. They show up with a fire extinguisher and ruin, the firework / bonfire at the edge of the lake. This is kind of gonna end up with your characters in a spot where everyone thinks they're super lame, and at this point they have to accept and embrace the fact that they are super lame, because we can see the value in it in a way. Like, everyone's like, you guys are the worst club ever. Not only did you have your own fun, you came here and you ruined ours. And the reason they did that, because they're being more responsible, they're being more adults, they're being more grown up, and they've basically used this experience to bond them and cement them as a team that will work together to have not only have their own fun, but to be more responsible, mindful citizens of the world.
Very community-like. I see this. I actually read Community during this thing today. It was a quick read.
Yeah. So this ends up, I guess that basically takes us through to the end, and we have our stinger would be, let's say 2 weeks later, it's another club meeting, and we just sort of think of the Troy and Abed moments. We just sort of look at the fan favorite characters doing something funny. It doesn't have to be your main character. She might be in it, but like, let's look at fan favorite characters. Maybe kind of cinching off a recurring joke from this episode or something like that. We kind of like return to a recurring joke, or just do something funny / amusing that shows that they are now a club that is going to be meeting from now on. And yes,
yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yes,
yeah,
but we lean into it. All right, because they are essentially, by agreeing to continue meeting in this club, they are forsaking a certain level of popularity. I think that, being the offline people who are going to go do camping and knitting and stuff would damage your popularity in some ways. All right, so that just took us through the whole show. You don't have to use any of that, but does that at least maybe kind of give you some ideas of how to frame this?
Yes. Yep, very helpful.
Cool. Questions?
Not right now, but maybe for next week.
Okay, sounds good. So basically, the last thing I wanted to emphasize is, so if we start this by trying to get Chad's approval or attention, this has to end with her rejecting Chad's approval or attention, to show that she has grown beyond it. That will be our sign of progress, right? So at the beginning, that's what causes her breakdown. The fact that at the end, Chad is the one at the party, like, you're ruining all our fun. She has to knock back down and say, I don't care that I've upset you, Chad. I don't need you. Okay, so that's the basics of how I would just put something like this together. I know that's not necessarily all very good, but that's just, like, I hope sort of emphasizes to everyone, not just Amanda, how we need to get the premise of the show underway by the end of the first act. We can't wait until the very, like, imagine if Community was Jeff on his own for 29 minutes, then at the end we meet all the other characters. It just wouldn't work. We have to execute the premise that you promised us in this very first episode, and we need to get it going pretty quickly. And then we want to be having your main characters clash and collide in funny, interesting ways all throughout the second act. using the promise of what you've given us. So if this is going to be people trying to get through teenage life without the internet, we want to see a very clear visual external example of the challenges that would cause. And that's why I picked the hiking trip. Okay, questions from anyone? Everyone feel good about the next step? Crickets, silence. All right, if everyone seems okay, then we will wrap up for today. So for next time, story beat summary. It seems like no one has any questions left about that, so you should be able to write up at least the 3-page document that is going to tell us what happens in the first act, second act, and third act. Use this little method that I just used of the 5 bullet points per scene for half hour. It's going to be maybe 6 bullet points per scene per act for full hour, but you have 5 acts. So you have twice as much room in the full hour long, and you've got to read a script for next time and come ready to discuss, talk about just what did you read, what did you notice. All right, that's going to be the end of class today. Thank you guys so much for coming by. We'll see you next week for Story Beats. We have a reading at 2 o'clock today for Zach's script, and we have Fantasy Group with Amanda at 5. We'll see you guys soon. Thanks a lot.